Hello and welcome to TV on TV. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group. Today is Thursday, October 14th. We got a great show. We've got Linda Olson Pehlke, one of the founders and member of the steering committee for Brookline by Design. We're going to talk about Brookline by Design and about planning and zoning Brookline in an interview recorded yesterday. But first, as always, the news. The Biden administration has announced plans to loosen travel restrictions at U.S. borders with Mexico and Canada, allowing fully vaccinated travelers to enter the country. In 2022, Social Security benefits will increase by 5.9% to account for changes in the cost of living. This comes as the Consumer Price Index rose by 5.4% in September. Yesterday, Governor Baker activated 200 members of the Massachusetts National Guard to assist with COVID testing in public schools. Well, just last week, National Guard members were activated to help drive school buses in several communities that have had difficulty getting enough qualified folks to drive. And next week, who knows what the National Guard will be up to. Earlier this week, the Redistricting Committee, the Joint Committee on Redistricting, released proposed state representative and state Senate maps. And on the state Senate side, Brookline's impact is really simple. Cindy Crean will continue to represent all of Brookline, as well as all of Newton. Her Wellesley representation has grown from much of Wellesley to all of Wellesley. So that's simple from Brookline's perspective. On the House side, it's a little different. For those who know their precincts, here we go. Representative Michael Moran currently represents Precinct 1. That representation will be moved to me. My district will now include Precinct 1. I currently represent Precinct 13. That will now be represented by Kevin Honan. Nika Elugardo currently represents Precinct 5. A portion of that will be assigned to me. Ed Coppinger currently represents precincts 14, 15, and 16. He will retain 16, but 14, 15, and the remaining part of 5 will be represented by Ruth Balzer of Newton. Now, this seems like a dramatic and new change, but in fact, 20 years ago, Precinct 13 was represented by a legislator from Alston Brighton. And 20 years ago, Ruth Balzer represented precincts 14 and 15 of Brookline. And so this is sort of an everything old is new again. These maps are not finalized. They won't be voted on until at least next week. However, because every change in a map can have a series of domino changes, my suspicion is that these maps are unlikely to change very much between now and their final form. Last Thursday at town meeting, Brookline's town meeting approved $4.9 million in spending for a ground source heat pump at Driscoll School. And of course, this past Monday was an exciting Marathon Monday, Columbus Day, and Indigenous Peoples Day. My legs are still quite sore after the marathon, having stood and watched it for several hours. My kids and I were fortunate to see the winners, as well as so many runners running on behalf of Brookline Charities. The next Boston Marathon is not a year away, it is 6 months away, at least if COVID allows. Without further ado, I'm really excited to get into this interview with Linda Olson Pehlke, a member of the steering committee for Brookline by Design. Stay tuned to Brookline Interactive, and we'll see you on the flip side. And as promised, today we've got my good friend Linda Olson Pehlke on the show today, and she is a steering committee member for a new organization in town called Brookline by Design. Linda, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Tommy, and belated happy birthday.
You're so sweet. It was a major milestone. I turned 43. Right.
It's hard for me to believe. I mean, I remember he was a little whippersnapper, so.
Well, people give me a hard time that my son used to be a little whippersnapper. Now he's taller than some Kim Smiths.
Yeah.
But let's
He's
talk
quite
about
good.
Brookline by Design.
Sure.
First, let's start with like what
What the
is
heck
this
is it?
all about?
Heck is it? Yeah. Okay, so we formed earlier this year, around February or so. It was a group of us who were concerned about planning and land use in Brookline. I think the key to understanding what we're about is in the name, design, Brookline by Design. And when I think about design, it's about intentional problem solving and looking at a problem holistically and finding ways of solving things that are elegant and purposeful and intentional and well thought out. And that's what we think Brookline needs. You know, I come from a different part of the country, and I've always appreciated the history here. You know, I'm from Michigan. And I've always seen Brookline as a very, very special place. And I think we have to be careful about how we go forward. And that's kind of what we're about. And we're about involving the entire community and all stakeholders in these kind of discussions and decision-making. We have a proposal that kind of outlines how a planning process might unfold in Brookline. It was, you know, I think we did this to show that it's possible, that it's feasible. Here's what it might look like. We tried to make it as realistic as possible by getting, you know, quotes and all that kind of stuff. So we're about comprehensive accommodation of all goals in Brookline. And I think that that is in reaction to the situation that we're in. I mean, COVID changed everything. We have a lot of activism in town around zoning issues. And it's not that we're opposed to anyone's agenda. It's that we feel that the agendas have to speak to one another and to speak to the other folks in town who aren't necessarily at the table with their agenda, the people who care about open space or recreation or historic preservation or, you know, just sustainability in general. There's a lot of issues that need to be kind of meshed together, and there are trade-offs involved in planning, and we have to have a conversation. We can't avoid it.
So, but you formed recently, and I guess my question is, was there a single event or moment when it was like, oh, there's clearly a need for Brookline by Design, or has this been kind of building over months or years? Sort of get us from Brookline by Design is not in anybody's thought to people sitting around a kitchen table organizing. Walk us through that transition.
Sure. I've been very involved in planning and zoning issues in Brookline for a long time, as have a couple of the other members on our steering committee. And what we've seen happen is we did careful commercial development with overlay districts, and those were done by community relevant committees and expertise. And it spent we spent years developing very precise contextual zoning to accommodate new growth. And suddenly that's kind of changed. And people who are concerned about economic development in town, people who are concerned about housing, people who are concerned about climate, all kind of have focused on zoning as a tool to achieve their objectives. And I think that's appropriate, but not in the context of citizen petitions to town meeting. Because citizen petitions to town meeting, you don't actually have a context, you don't have a framework of what are the town's overarching goals and objectives. And often doing one thing at a time and making it broadly applicable across the whole town really doesn't do us justice. It doesn't get us the kind of change that we want. It's not a way of understanding and targeting growth. It's just a way of kind of pulling the plug on something and waiting to see what happens. So that was when I had the idea to bring the top zoning planner from Somerville to Brookline to interview him, because in my professional life as a planner, I kind of think about this stuff all the time, and I just see it as just part of my DNA. But I realized that in Brookline, we hadn't really experienced that kind of a process. And we hadn't seen also what the new zoning and planning tools could offer us. There's just so many great things that have been innovated since, our bylaw is from 1965, and it's the type of zoning, which we call Euclidean zoning, and it has nothing to do with geometry. It has to do with Euclid, the city of Euclid in Ohio against Ambler Realty, and the legal case that established the ability of municipalities to control their land use. So anyway, our zoning is based on a thought process of separating uses and actually fostering automobile dependency. And that's kind of why we have the suburbs and the world that we have around us. I mean, I'd be the first to say planners really screwed up. They adopted the automobile model. They believed in the separation of uses, and it really led us down a bad path. And so people have innovated new types of zoning, and one of them is form-based zoning, and it's modeled after places like Brookline to help communities create places like Brookline. I mean, we all know it's super desirable to live in a community that has walkability and transit access and a way to get around and live your life that's not stuck in a traffic jam. And people really value that. And so now we have a new form of zoning that we could possibly adopt in part over time. It's not easy, but I think it has a lot to offer us. We could improve sustainability on site design immensely. We could have better design, better contextual development, and development that is more by right than we have now, which improves predictability for everybody, including real estate interests. So I think we should really, explore that. And the steering committee, we've spent a lot of time learning about it. I already knew about it, but other people are getting into it now. And I think it's just something that is out there for us to take advantage of.
And so, it's clear that the big picture goal is to rewrite or alter zoning in a way that is thoughtful and results in development in Brookline that aligns with the community's values.
Absolutely. Right? And yeah. And the other thing about that, sorry, I'm interrupting you, but the other thing about that is in the past, when we had the overlay districts, we were able to negotiate directly with developers, and we would get relevant public benefits to that neighborhood. Like, for instance, with the Waldo Durgan project, there's going to be a pocket park across the street. That was negotiated directly. But if you turn towards doing zoning in a different way, meaning that you want to just proactively increase development potential without having a developer at the table, then we have to have a way of getting out of that transaction what's valuable to the community. And especially, I think, in terms of the public realm and complete streets improvements, we need to know what we want ahead of time so that we can get it. For instance, a place where sidewalks aren't wide enough. Well, going forward, you ask for a deeper setback so that over time you're going to be able to widen that sidewalk. Things like that. But you have to know what you want ahead of time. And you have to have a plan. And, our process, the whole thing starts with an actual plan that develops goals and metrics on those goals for the town. And that's going to, sometimes people tell me, I don't think Brookline will ever agree on anything. I don't accept that. I don't accept that at all. And I think there's a lot we can do to work through these issues. And I don't think we've ever really grappled with the fact that there are trade-offs, right? I mean, we have separate plans for open space and recreation. We have separate plans for climate action. We have separate plans for housing. We have separate plans. Well, you can't do it all because there are limited resources and limited land. And somebody's going to lose in that unless we actually figure out how to create synergies and make the whole greater than the parts. And I think that's imminently possible.
So I'm going to ask part B first and then part A. Part B is, how long does it take to get from today to having implemented this plan? And then part A is, what's that process look like? But start with part B. Realistically,
Part B, how long?
it's October 2021.
Yeah.
If Brookline by design takes the town by storm and everybody's enthusiastic and sort of best case scenario where folks see that this is a good way forward and they participate and advocate for the things that they think are most important to them. And then there's this process, which I can't wait to hear about. And then town meeting passes some laws. When does the dust clear? Give us a sense for how long we think this will take.
Well, our proposal is a 3-year process, but it requires a real commitment in terms of staff and funding and effort. And so it's a little hard to predict. And it's hard for people to conceive of this, but we're simply advocating for a process, not an outcome. And it's not up to us to run this thing. I mean, it's our new planning director, Kara Bruton. It's our planning board. It's the rest of our town staff. It's town meeting. It's everyone has to be on board for us to be able to move forward. And that's the phase that we're in now. We're having discussions. We're trying to sort of sell the idea, right? To get people enthusiastic about it and to help people understand how it's going to help their agenda to move forward. That's really what it came out of, is hearing that people were wanting to see change, but not really knowing how to get there. And this is an offering of a process of how to get there. So 3 years is reasonable. People return to the Somerville example to throw cold water on our estimate. But the thing about Somerville is that they had a major redo, right? They had to plan new T-stops. They had to plan new real big redevelopment zones. They had to plan for infrastructure improvement. I mean, they had a much larger scope of work than we would have. So we do hold by our estimate of approximately 3 years.
And at the end of 3 years, you've got a 200-page document. You've got laws passed. What is?
Yeah, well, ideally, it would be a redrafted zoning bylaw. Is it more likely that it's going to be pieces of a zoning bylaw? I think so. But yeah, to start implementing some of the ways, some of the changes that's going to get us towards our goals, and continue working on the other pieces. That's kind of realistic. But I mean, I do want to remind people that it is town meeting that has the ultimate say here on zoning. So I think that should give people comfort in entering into the process, because they have the final say in town meeting.
Now the process itself, right? As you mentioned, we have our new director of planning is Kara Bruton. She's been in the planning department for the town of Brookline for many years. She's not new to Brookline or to planning.
Right.
And what other sorts of groups ought to be at the table? What interests or advocacy or neighborhoods or something? Who would we expect to be showing up to these conversations?
Yeah, so first off, I'm thrilled about Kara Bruton being our planning director. Yay, go Kara. We suggest that the select board appoint a project governance committee. And we anticipate, I think one thing that Brookline does really poorly is this idea that we appoint boards and committees that have reps from other boards and committees. Well, we don't think that's an appropriate model. We think we need to hear from, the business community, the faith-based community, advocates for whatever they're advocates for, representatives of different communities in town, different populations, people with language barriers, all kinds of things we have to pay attention to make sure we have an equitable and fair and inclusive process. So we're imagining this governance committee being, maybe 25 people from the community representing different stakeholders or constituencies. And we have to work really hard. And I think we need a consultant who is an expert on this to advise us on how best to do real meaningful dialogue and community engagement, not the usual, we're having one public hearing at 7 p.m. and if you can't be there, too bad, your voice doesn't count. I mean, that was one of the things that I really tried to stress when I interviewed Dan Bartman from Somerville. Their engagement process was outstanding and very unique and different, and we have a lot to learn from them. So as far as who should be involved, it's really everybody. And I think we know that we have some advocacy groups in town who are going to make sure they're there every time there's a discussion, and that's okay. That's their right. That's what they should be doing. But we need to make sure that they're not drowning out everybody else. So that's a little bit about who I think we should care about being at the table.
We'll make a brief public service announcement. If there is a public comment period and you cannot be there, you can always submit written comments. So don't ever feel like because you can't be there at 7 o'clock,
yes, that's
your
true.
comments aren't important or valued.
Yeah.
You to submit written comments. And frankly, like these days, I suppose you could record yourself on Zoom and send them a link, right? I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could do it.
Yeah, we do have technology.
I do
that
appreciate
helps.
the point that only commenting once on an arc, on a long process, doesn't allow for folks to learn and grow and respond and react to the process itself. This sort of continual feedback, I think, does have added value.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the next steps? All right, you've got this idea, kicking it around, but lots of ideas have been kicked around a long time and haven't progressed.
Yeah.
So how does Brookline by Design move forward now?
Well, we did submit a warrant article to town meeting. That's warrant article 26, and it's a resolution calling for this very type of process, a comprehensive, community-driven planning process, looking towards zoning reform. And we've incorporated our proposal that we did submit for ARPA funding. And that's a whole nother topic that I kind of don't want to get into. But it's not that that's the only source of funds, obviously. And the price tag, I'll tell you the price tag that we came up with, which was $1,213,000, and people gasped. And I think it's realistic. And I personally cannot think of anything more worthwhile to invest in for the future of Brookline. Honestly, it's so important. And, there was some money that was allocated in our CIP for a zoning I don't know, rationalization process, I guess you could call it, a zoning cleaning up. And we didn't spend that money, and the task was really not doable. So there's a little bit of funds there to get started. Everything is kind of in flux with our budget. We just kind of blew it up at town meeting. So that's really kind of not my job. The resolution tells the select board to please find the money to do this. And so we've been having discussions with various groups in town. We're doing outreach. We feel that we were seen as obstructionists and labeled NIMBYs and all the rest of it. And nothing could actually be further from the truth. We're trying to facilitate being able to move forward in this work, and in a way that would give us a really good professionalized result. And so we're sort of correcting the record now. We're hoping to pass the resolution at town meeting. We're hoping we can get more than the 600 residents who have signed our letter asking for this. We continue to outreach to the public, and we will persist in that. And I guess that's really all we can do right now.
Certainly enough to stay busy. So you'll be ramping up to the fall town meeting. And of course, there's quite a few articles about several issues. And there's multiple land use warrant articles. I'm trying to hearken my memory for the warrant, right? My recollection is that we've got a proposed local historic district or expansion of the local historic district.
It's a thematic local historic district in South Brookline, Richardson Olmsted. That's one.
I was thinking there was also something over in precinct 8 or 9.
No,
I've got that wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's also at least one, maybe several zoning articles about parking minimums.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's a couple of things kicking around. And I guess, the question that we don't have enough time to answer is if the Brookline by Design resolution passes that says, hey, we should do this.
Mm-hmm.
What is on limits or off limits between now and when that process is done? Like, how do we decide what changes should we make while we are engaged in this bigger planning process? Right. And obviously every town meeting member is going to decide for himself or herself. And that's the way it's going to go. Right. There's no simple answer to this question. But look, like there are loads of things in life where we are planning something, but we don't stop frozen solid. In the meantime, we try not to make big decisions if we know we've got this plan coming out, but we might make some small decisions along the way. And I think that's what Somerville has done as well. So I think that'll be an interesting sort of thing to navigate, is how do we both do the day-to-day or the near term while also engaging in this maybe 3-year, maybe 10-year, maybe somewhere in between year planning process. Certainly lots of work ahead. Any final thoughts? Anything else we should know about?
So I don't have a chance to answer that question. So
no, there's not really an answer to it, right? Everybody's
we do address these issues.
We've only got about 30 seconds left.
No, everything that's ongoing remains ongoing. That's how I would put it. These things are going to keep happening. The studies are going to be useful information. For instance, the housing study is going to give us really great information to help as the housing element of a plan. So since I only have a few seconds, I will tell you about our website. It's Brookline by Design, all one word, .com. And you can see our resolution, our proposal. You can see who signed our letter. You can learn a little bit more about planning. You can see the Somerville video. It's all there on our website.
Linda, I'm so glad you were able to come on the show today, folks. Linda Pehlke, not just steering committee member for Brookline by Design, but longtime planner and advocate in North Brookline, longtime town meeting member, longtime rose gardener and leader, I presume that one comes with the
Mhm.
other. So Linda, thanks so much for showing up today. And thanks viewers for watching us here on Brookline Interactive Group. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me.